Let me give you a heartbreaking update on long-standing tragedy in Canada. A new coroner's report has uncovered 220 additional deaths at the notorious Indian residential school in Ontario, bringing the total known deaths in the province to 666. Now, this revelation comes after extensive research into historical records, many of which were previously hidden or protected. So, how did this happen and why is it so much important? Let's dive in. These deaths, mostly of children, occurred at several residential schools that were set up back in 1830s and operated for over a century. The goal of these schools was to assimilate indigenous children in European Canadian society. But this came as a devastating cost. Overcrowding, poor hygiene, and lack of medical care caused infectious diseases to spread rapidly. As you can imagine, this was a major factor in number of the deaths. However, there is more to this story. The investigation uncovered deaths that in today's term would be considered criminal negligence. Many of these deaths were either not reported or investigated at the time, leaving families in dark about their children's fate. In some cases, children were buried in unmarked graves, further deepening this tragedy. The investigation focused on three major residential schools: St. Anne's Residential School in Northern Ontario, St. Anne's Residential School in Northern Ontario, St. Joseph Training School for Boys near Ottawa, and the Mohawk Institute Indian Residential School in Brantford near Toronto. These were just few of 131 schools that made up a nationwide system. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which investigated the legacy of these schools, estimated that more than 4,500 children died across Canada, and many of whom were buried without any mark. For years, families of these victims had no answers. There was just a painful silence. Meanwhile, Mark, the leader of residential school death investigation team, shared that this work is not just about uncovering the numbers. If I quote what he said, then we are bringing answers to the families that never had them. No, it's about acknowledging the immense pain and loss that Indigenous families have carried for generations. Meanwhile, Ontario's chief coroner emphasized that this investigation continued to work, started by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. The vast majority didn't know anything or very much about what happened to these children. That's what exactly he said. Now, this story is more than just a reflection of the past. It's about understanding the lasting trauma that these schools inflicted on Indigenous community. The Canadian government has pledged to continue its investigation into these deaths and ensure justice for the victims. Consider this. At the peak of the residential school system, over 61,000 children attended these schools. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report back in 2015 confirmed the loss of thousands of Indigenous children. And this investigation is yet another step in the journey to find the answers. The families who lost their children are still waiting for the truth. The ongoing investigation aims to bring them to closure that they do deserve. As we reflect on this tragedy, it's crucial to ask ourselves, what can we do to honor the memory of those who lost their lives? And how can we ensure that such a dark chapter in the history is never repeated? We want to hear your thoughts on this. Let's continue to stay informed, stay passionate, and learn from our past. Thanks for joining TimesXP tonight.